All right, I'm here with the wonderful Peter DeBenedittis, or Peter D in short. I got actually firstly introduced to your material through my friend and assistant Christopher, who has linked a Kevin Moore interview to me, which I have watched in the entirety. It was very enjoyable. And from what I understand, Peter used to counsel people who were struggling with alcoholism addiction, but then had a spiritual awakening and met a famous channeler, which was Lee Carroll, as far if I get this right. And you had a travel to Egypt that led to some activations, yeah. But you were also in South America and had some wonderful experience with some shamans, and you're now beginning to express your higher mind, and your higher mind is very invited to speak with not only the people that I work with, but everybody who feels drawn to it, resonates to it, is magnetized towards it. And today, what I love about conversations with meeting other mystics is that we will have an ability to relate in a more intimate way, that it's not only for, in a sense, a mass consciousness, but that we can speak about our individual processes. Yeah, as far as Peter's higher self and him agree, like on how much they want to share, what they feel serves and what doesn't serve, that's for them to decide because they're sovereign. And as such,
Well, thank you so much, Julian, for inviting me here. Thank you. I'm honored to be with you. It's the energy of meeting you is quite nice. And you use the word mystic. No one's ever described me as a mystic before, and that's really cool. So thank you.
Well, when you start speaking to your higher mind and you're entering Christ consciousness, how can I not call you a mystic?
I appreciate it. Yeah. And it's kind of weird because I'm still getting used to the transition and trying to help people with it as well. But it's kind of weird to identify me as we and identify me as my sacred higher self, because it's like 24/7 now. It's not like, oh, let me channel and a different voice comes out. It's mine. And then I'm getting guided and directed and impulses when stuff like that. And I can clearly tell when I'm talking and then I sense my sacred higher self nodding or applauding or thinking, no, consider this other thing. So it's kind of interesting. The me, we will be here with you.
Well, that's the fun part, yeah. That there's suddenly a shifting from an I to a we, and there's the sensing of, oh, I'm more than one personality, and they're all present. And when they speak, they're actually speaking harmoniously. They're sharing minds, so they speak as one voice, even though it's as many different personalities.
Yeah, see, this was a really interesting thing when I was encountered it. So I went to Oneness University a bunch of times in India and studied under Sri Bhagavan and was given awakening there. And they basically told us that you're not a personality. When you become awakened and your mind quiets and you come into the field of oneness, then whatever personality is necessary will rise up at that time. And that will be, if you let it go uncensored, it'll be perfect for the moment. So there's all these times that when it first happened where I would just watch, did I just say that? Did those words come out of me? Where did that come from? And stuff. And the more I allowed it, the more it's like, man, I'm in flow. Everything's working and I'm feeling good. But I really had to let go a lot of the expectations, the social norms about what the person is supposed to or not supposed to do in a moment.
Well, the expectations are projection from memory, is where the ego tries to predict the future and says, based on my limited data bank, I know what's going to happen. And it tries to prevent that from happening. But then suddenly, when we accept the ego and we love the ego quiets down and it stops interfering. And suddenly the database is so much bigger. And we have this clumsy word that we call intuition, but intuition is just a word for a tremendous diversity of frequency bands that we can channel, and everybody's channeling something. An artist is channeling, a musician is channeling, they're all channeling something. And then people who are in the mind, they get obsessed with the idea of genius. For example, why is Mozart a genius? Well, Mozart is a genius because he has past lives playing music. He didn't start as a like 6-year-old and he began there and he was this child prodigy. No, he went through hard training in other lifetimes and then he remembered. He opened the
Yeah,
floodgates to that.
that's beautiful. Yeah. So I've been playing with this notion of transferring, of how to take a skill or ability or frequency that's I'm holding or aware of and spreading it. Okay. Because every time I check in with the source, it's like, yeah, do more of that, do more of that. You're the amplifier out there. So it's interesting to sit there for me to say, okay, I've got this in me and I want to give it to somebody else. How does that done? Right? Because there's no mind, there's no teaching, there's no explanation. It's a matter of saying, oh, all of this is available to me, and opening up and allowing myself to experience it, and then just inviting the other person into that field. So I was contemplating that over the weekend, and I was like, can I really do this? Are these really real things, or is my head just making this stuff up? And Spirit says to me, Peter, it's like this. You're totally interested in helping others. That's what's been driving you, is to do the service, to spread the transmissions. We're going to go out of our way to help you. We're going to give you whatever you need to do that, as long as you're focused on that kind of service. That's the kind of support that's available. And so it just boggles me, because and they're okay with it. And we don't care why you do. We don't care if it's out of ego or pride or anything. As long as you're helping other people, we're going to help you. And then, of course, all those ego pride things fade away because they're just not very satisfying over time.
Oh no, they are not. In fact, they're trying to take the joy out of everything. Yeah, by making it less than what it is, because when sometimes language is very revealing when we say, oh, this is just that. And in the moment we add a just or we add a but in a sentence, we're trying to diminish the reality of what we are experiencing and make it something less. When in truth, there's such a profound intelligence behind the mirroring, basically what the physics are. The physics are mirroring our energy. And they're constantly, in a fully loving way, supporting us in what we want to experience. And there's a profound intelligence in everything. At one point, a teacher to us can be a dog that we stumble into around the corner. And suddenly the dog displays something of an utterly divine nature, because when we understand that in the higher dimensions, there is no separation, that whatever is in the higher dimensions can reach down into the individual entity and begin expressing itself at any point in time. And maybe to describe to you a little bit what we do, we are building a monastery in Peru in the mountains.
Cool.
Why are we doing this? Well, very straightforward. Our assignment is to teach the teachers, to the next generation of spiritual teachers.
That's so funny. That's so funny, because about 4 months ago, Spirit says to me, okay, you're going to get really big. Get ready for it. And I'm like, what does that mean? And like, just start to prepare. We don't want to like lay a plan out for you, because then you'll follow it. You'll know. And I'm like, okay. And so all of a sudden I find myself doing interviews like this. And then a friend tells me about a different program that he was involved in for functional medicine. A guy figured out that he couldn't do medicine the right way with enough people, just him. So he had to train a bunch of people how to do it. And he developed a whole system for that. And my friend was interested in learning this and tells me about it. He goes, oh, by the way, you're telling me you're getting busy now. You might want to consider this. So then everything shifted. And all of a sudden, the next 18 months very clearly laid out. Okay, you're going to write 3 books. You're going to have different levels of teaching, and the highest level of teaching is training the next level of people who are ready to pass it out. And without having to go through what I went through, which was to follow different orders or to practice, and travel to distant places, to just put it out online. So it's just cracking me up, just Julian, for you to sit there and say, we're building a location in Peru where they're going to have a sacred place to do this very thing. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to have to come visit. And, but it's also because because I've been called to do the same thing, except to do it online. And I just think that that's just a beautiful synchronicity.
Oh, we will do both. We will do it online, but we'll also do it in retreats. And what can I say? My tantric practice is Tibetan, my Zen is Japanese, my Kriya yoga is Indian. But ultimately,
Right. Yeah, that's how I am. It's like, oh, some of this works and some of that works, and it vibrates with my frequency, and it vibrates with enough other people I could teach them. It's beautiful. I can't wait for your center to get together and come visit. It's on my list now.
Well, we have already bought the land, and it's in a valley up in the mountains. It's actually embraced by 3 different mountain peaks. It's very protected. It's secluded, quiet, right next to a wide mountain river. The water is so pure, it can be just drunk there. We have some hidden places there I cannot speak about because this is spiritually protected, but it funnels energy. Yeah? Your Egyptian self will remember this because you have an Egyptian self.
Right.
When it comes to the pyramids, they create an energy pillar right in the center, and the energy pillar goes up. So what the initiates in the past would do in Egypt, we would begin meditating in that energy pillar and trigger the Kundalini force, and then it would rise up, assisted by the energy pillar of the pyramid, and it would also lead to a faster purification. And in a way, mountains do the same thing. They funnel energy through a central energy channel. And when you are in the mountains,
that's funny. I moved to Santa Fe, 25 years ago, whatever, and I felt the energy, and I kept explaining to people, I don't know what's going on, but it's like my soul's getting roto-rooted, like just cleaning all that junk out. I just don't know what's going on living here. And then eventually, the more I sat with it, the more I learned, it's the end of a very nice mountain range, and those peaks are all filled with crystals, and there's a lot of energy here. So I kind of stumbled into it. Now here, you by design have picked a place that amplifies that. I'm like, how cool is that?
Well, what I can share, I did meditate there, and I saw past happenings with regards to the Inca. So what I saw, that a lot of Inca priests, they got corrupt and they got into black magic. They were obsessed with sex, and they had a certain materialistic greeds. They were taking 10 wives at a time, and they started accumulating this greed energy. And I saw, let's say, dark astral force coming down from the temples. Now, those priests who were teaching what we would call the law of one, who were legit, they had visions of the Spanish coming. And because they didn't know what the Spanish were, but they know that there was some sort of karmic retribution coming for the abuse of divine force. So what happened is, those shamans, they went into the mountains, and they had certain places of worship in the mountains. Those energies are very pure because they were not used for selfish reasons. They were not used from a separate mind. They were there to preserve the knowledge, because they would know at some point, when the time is right, they would come back down from the mountains and reintroduce society to those practices. And for me, what was quite clear is, I do understand with regards to past life memory. I remember being a lama in Tibet. I remember being a yogi twice in India. I remember being a Japanese Buddhist abbot who was leading a monastery. So all these things came back to me over the last 3 years, and they were very vivid because I would re-experience them in a form of remote viewing, but emotionally through the body. So I would feel what, let's say, the Japanese monk was feeling in certain circumstances, or the yogis were experiencing. And not too long ago, I was visiting a friend in Italy, and I was meditating, and I had a manifestation of Pachamama. She would suddenly appear in front of me as this beautiful white woman in great detail. And then I saw tree branches growing from her back, and 2 jaguar spirits beside her for protection. And the next thing that happened was that she showed me a community in the mountain, which is representing our monastery. And she showed that she was holding a child to her chest and giving the child milk, and the child was representing the community. Come to Peru. We are going to nurture you. I'm going to protect you. When you get a call like this, you drop everything. If you're being of faith, you don't hesitate.
Wow. Well, that's so exciting. And just talking to you, it's like I'm feeling a connection to the land and the mountain, and I know I'm going to be there, and I'm going to see if I can't. I had this experience of I've been afraid of writing, right? I've always wanted to write books and never could get it together, right? And but then here Spirit tell me, oh, you're going to write 3 books. I'm like, okay. And so I started just being obsessed. It had to come out. So I got the first draft of the first book done in under 3 weeks because it was just so potent coming out. And part of it was I was on vacation with my wife and visiting her family in North Carolina. They'd go to the beach all day. I'd just be happy at home writing. And I keep thinking, it was nice to not be in my house, to just be free. And so I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to write me a book. I'm going to see if I can come to your monastery for 2 or 3 weeks and just get another book while I'm there and just enjoy the sacred energy, because that's like, just listening to you talk is filling me up so much.
Well, I'm getting downloads about your past life, but you need to check in with your higher mind if it's okay if we speak about it. There's a reason you felt the focus with writing.
Please do.
I see you writing in Atlantis, and I see you writing in Egypt. Yeah, with papyrus, beautifully with ink. And since your soul is quite old when it comes to the human experience, you experience a lot of cycles. And when it comes to cycles, we often have the rise of a culture and then the downfall of a culture. And a part of you is very aware of the downfalls and the disappearance of knowledge. And a part of you is frustrated with writing because, like, I have been writing all these things, but they have not been surviving.
Yeah. I'm resonating with the truth of that. And what I'm aware of from my own thing is not only that, but sometimes I'm afraid of speaking my voice. Because, I thought I was doing a good thing in one of my lives in Atlantis. I was the PR guy for the Great Crystal. So I was telling everybody, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to help so many people. And then, of course, it messes up and kills millions. and I'm like, oh, yeah, I did that. All right. So I'm always worried, this little back thing of, okay, let's see, you're really going to say this. But it's like, this is the whole beauty of what I'm learning now and what I'm able to teach now is you complete the experience. You have the full experience. I feel what it's like to have done that and feel it fully. And then it clears the density out of me. And I learned this was so cool. Forgiveness. I was worried how I can be forgiven, how I forgive others. And I learned that if you experience something fully, all the emotion are fully experienced, there's nothing left to forgive. So it doesn't matter if they did it to you or you did it to them. The emotion is now complete. It's outside the field. There's not that energy there of, oh, they did this to me or I did that to them. There's only the field of bliss because you've cleared it. And so forgiveness instantly takes place. And then, of course, you can actually speak to it and recognize it and tell the person. But what's super weird is a lot of times I'll do that process and I'll get clear on forgiveness. And then I'll talk to the person who, especially if they were a person who was like nasty to me, I'll talk to them and they'll have no memory of it. And I'm like, what? And then I realized that, and this happened repeatedly, and it happened to my friends as well, is that you flip a timeline. You're in a whole different time stream where that never took place. You remember it because you did the clearing, but they don't remember because it's a different them who had never done those things because you cleared that energy. And I'm like, so it's like all of a sudden I'm not just I'm multidimensional and a soul with a lot of fractals, but so are they. And all of a sudden I'm dealing with a different them, but a much nicer them because of the forgiveness work. And so even though, I still have that little bug in my mind occasionally, oh yeah, go ahead and say this to the world and millions die, so what, right? My mind's telling me that. It's like, no, I did my work. I felt that, so it's clear. And that's why I think I'm able to write now. And your advice or your suggestion about it is going to be more contemplation for me later, which I will enjoy.
Well, when it comes to forgiveness, I remember something that the Buddha made very clear. When you 100% understand somebody, you cannot hate them. And
yeah.
and this is something that I have been experiencing quite a lot. I give you an example, and it will make wonderful sense. So when we bought the property in Peru for the temple space, those farmers that were buying the property from, once they decided to sell, they quickly went into the property and cut down 4 or 5 trees. And they did it exactly at a point where it would have created an energetic barrier for protection. So I sat down in meditation because I want to get into a state of forgiveness, because I was grieving the trees a little bit. So I'm sitting down meditating, and I'm seeing that those farmers were here when the conquistadors came. And they remember the conquistadors chopping off the arms and the heads of their friends in battle. And because they remember that, and we were foreigners, they subconsciously had that revenge energy and that conquistador greed energy that they couldn't forgive, because they quickly wanted to get the wood of the property before we would actually claim it as our own. So not only that, but because we were foreigners, they basically were exercising the trauma energy, not by chopping off limbs and heads, but by chopping down the trees. And they don't even know where the energy came from. And when I checked more deeply, I also understood there were some dark entities that were using their not integrated shadow to manipulate them to take down the trees. But when you understand why they're doing it, and this is something when it comes to like sharing mind with higher beings. In this case, for example, I've shared mind a lot with Kali and Ganesh. And when I do that, I have no questions. I always come out with a perfect understanding. My mind is very still, and I have no questions to pose anymore, because the description is so total. The experience is total. And when the experience is total, you just have this eureka moment. Yeah, as a philosopher, so when you have this eureka moment, oh, I understand. When you understand, there's just no questioning. There is no localized disturbance that the psychology would create, because the higher understanding is so all-pervasive that the local mind surrenders and says, nothing I can come up with can even come close to that explanation.
See, your ability to describe this is just beautiful. See, the way it works for me is when I'm in connection with those higher beings, right? I just get into the field of, whoa, right? And then I don't even remember what questions I had, right? And then when I come out of it, I'm like, oh, I needed to ask them questions about this or that. But all the charges are gone. Oh, I don't care about that anymore. It's not a big deal. Whatever it was bothering me before is now cleared. And so I kind of do it experientially without understanding. It does lead to a lot more forgiveness for people, all the people I see doing the horrible stuff that's in the world, you know, all that stuff. We don't need to talk about that. When I see them, and it's just surprises the heck out of me that I will start loving them from time to time. Oh, and it's like, what? These are horrible people, and I spent my whole life hating them. What is this all about? And it's just so nice. But to hear you describe how that forgiveness takes place was so nice, because for me it was never rational. I just go in and come out and okay, clear.
Yeah, in that way, I'm trained in a very specific type of understanding. It's a lot of beings that get into the spiritual practice via intuition, but there's a strong conceptual and theoretical understanding that has also been trained in me. So I give you an example. If I would read a book, for example, if I would read Carl Gustav Jung, or if I would read Alan Watts, or if I would read something about Tibetan Buddhism, what happens for me is I start reading, and 5 to 10 minutes later, I hear the voices of the ones who have been writing those works. I hear them in my head. So the books become a portal. I'm suddenly not reading a book. I'm having a dialogue with the consciousness that has written the book. And when that happens, what I often see, I see them as holographic projections. So one time I was sitting in Italy on a beautiful terrace in a mansion in Tuscany, and Carl Jung suddenly manifested in front of me on a chair. and started debating this book, man, and his symbols with me. And at one point, he took over and did a session through me by doing dream analysis and past life analysis of somebody.
Wow.
And he was very happy. He said, thank you for doing this, that I could have another session with a human because he doesn't have a body right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So he was like happy that he could reach through me and do that. So there is this moment where suddenly we don't have this limited psychology anymore, that we have entered the Holy Spirits. Now we're dealing with a much more subtle form of physics. So we're quieting down our local physics. We stop making noise in our local brain. Now the more subtle energy we become aware of, because through the stillness, you can pick it up, you can detect it, right? And this is how channeling begins for most people. And then at some point, we feel that our mind is like a membrane and it vibrates depending what entity or reality or dimension is interacting with it. But we need to quiet down our locality so we become non-local. And once we're non-local, suddenly your higher mind may speak to certain ascended masters. They might merge with your mind. And one time I asked them, I was meditating on a park bench in Germany, and I asked them, how do you talk to me so fast? Why do you have always the perfect answers? And then they said, well, it's very simple. Where we are, there is no time. And because there is no time, there is no processing limit. And because there's no processing limit, we can all merge our minds and we can speak as one. And I asked them, to how many am I speaking right now? And they said 40.
Oh, I love what you're saying. I got to tell you a little park bench story, because why not? I mean, park benches are so important. I remember Eckhart Tolle's book when he said, I had my awakening experience and I spent most of the next couple of months sitting on a park bench. Anyway, so I've been in this meditation group for over a decade, and we've created a group consciousness ourselves. And one of the people in the group consciousness suggested a meditation of sitting on a park bench next to yourself at the end of time. So all time has taken place as we know it, and all that you have become and are and will be is there with you. And you get to cuddle with your essence and your being of all this. And so we just do this meditation all the time, just go sit on the park bench. And it's so wonderful because, one, you know that it all turns out okay in linear mind. It doesn't really matter. You worry about this and that, but it all turns out okay. Right. And the other thing is, what you were saying is like, how many people are there? Well, it's like, how many people am I with at the end of time? How many hundreds of thousands of lifetimes of experience and expression as this unique individual or that unique individual. And that's just what I call the me, not the all of the, that you connect to. So I just love park benches for that reason. So I'm glad you put that in your story.
Well, park benches have something magical, don't they? Because park benches is where we usually, what I noticed, and you might find that relates wonderfully. So the park benches that I were meditating on, they were on a graveyard.
Oh.
Well, graveyards in Europe are very beautiful. I mean, your last name sounds Italian, so maybe you know.
It is. It is Italian, yeah.
So the beautiful thing is that when we get in touch with spirit, there is not this ultimate fear of dread. Ultimate fear of death. There is not this existential dread. There might be relative concerns like, oh, when it happens, how will I experience it? How will I go through it? These are relative concerns, but there is not this ultimate dread that the ego has in the very beginning of the idea of death, where it suddenly tries to immortalize everything that is temporary, which is complete insanity. As you can see, for example, with many dictators, they had to build gigantic statues of themselves so their ego would even survive their death. Yeah, they live in a constant state of anxiety, these type of people. But meditating on the graveyard, I met plenty of beings that were not spiritual practitioners, but they were in the process of contemplation, where they began contemplating life because they went through some sort of loss and they had an experience of impermanence, and their ego was acting up because of the fear of impermanence. And then I would sit there and meditate, and when people had those questions, Well, they didn't understand rationally who was sitting on that park bench, but they felt attracted. So they start sitting with me. And I had this one moment. I still get tears in my eyes from that because it's so very beautiful. Wow. There was this man, a very gentle man, and his wife died. And he loved her very much. And he did everything he could to make her death more comfortable. And she loved walnuts. So he started placing walnuts at her grave. He didn't understand why he did that. I later saw why he did that, and we can go into that. He had a Hindu lifetime, and he was remembering making sacrifices to the gods. So he would place the walnuts on the grave of his wife. And his soul had one wish. His soul wanted to receive timeless teaching. And I was sitting with him on the park bench, and I saw that he was praying to Hanuman in India. Please, this once, give me the answer to what is eternity? What am I? And suddenly, in another lifetime, he sits there with me on the park bench, and exactly that is happening. So his prayer got answered, but not in the same lifetime.
Oh, that's so interesting. Wow. When you start thinking about, see, as I understand it, lifetimes aren't linear. They're fractal, and they're all taking place now. And so It's really interesting that you're here in this lifetime making this prayer, and yet in this other lifetime, you're being helped with the answer. And it just blows my mind, the connectedness of where does inspiration come from? Where does this assistance come from? And it's come from all of your beings and all of the beings that are with you, helping you in all of the places you are. It's just boggling to me, Julian.
And you are helping them. So, for example, my Japanese self might have not worked out a certain thing, but Julian can. So Julian can sit down in meditation, remote view Japan, project himself, so to speak, as an angelic force, and then maybe implant that inspiration into the Japanese self.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm experiencing, and it's sometimes quite overwhelming. I had moments where I was sitting down in meditation and my whole body language would change. Suddenly I was sitting differently, and I was standing in the kitchen, and my wife was looking at me, and she said, "You're not you, but you're also you." In that moment, I tuned into one of the lifetimes where I was a yogi, and suddenly a different person was standing in the kitchen. But interestingly, from the point of awareness that is ultimate, that we all are, that cannot be separated or fractalized, from that point of awareness, you see the fluidity of those personalities occurring in the timelessness. Like they arise and they shift into each other. Either they happen as a multiplicity or they exchange activity. And to experience this this type of psychology that we're now getting, and it's super important for us to share this with the people, because when they're not properly trained, there's always the danger of psychosis, of schizophrenia arising, because the local ego will feel there are forces intruding, and it will try to erect barriers, and now you have the clash of very powerful divine forces and a hardening ego. And then suddenly those energies begin exponentially expressing the shadow. So everything that is unloved and unintegrated. And this is what people experience as psychosis, which none of the psychiatrists really understand, except if they have a spiritual practice themselves, they understand what it is.
Right. Yeah, that's why we're so lucky that Ascension, as I call it, is going slowly. I mean, I want it to go faster, of course, but if it did go faster,
smite me harder, God.
Yes, it smite me. I just cut a blog of one of my weekly blogs. I just recorded one this morning. I told the story of this woman I was in class with. It was a month-long class in India. She was there the first few days, and then she was gone. Didn't see her for a week, and then all of a sudden, one of the monks wheels her in on a wheelchair. And she gets to the front of the class and she's laughing hysterically. And in between fits of laughter, she's like, I can't take this anymore. Everything is just coming out and I can't stop laughing. And she's just laughing and laughing and laughing. I'm worried about my job. And she'd laugh about that. I'm worried about how am I going to be okay? And so then the monks wheel her out and say, okay, she'll get better in another week. Don't worry about her. She'll be fine. But just want you to understand the process for you can go as fast or slow as you like. You just have to accept what's going to happen when you release everything that was in you. And especially if you don't do it consciously, if you're like you said, the darkness within you arises and you don't know that that's what you're having experience to clear. You're not aware that that's what your focus is to clear that. So then, as you described it beautifully, the conflict of divine forces versus ego, and then you get all kinds of craziness. So I just think it's beautiful that one, we're talking about this. I really wanted to tell you that the kind of conversation we're having, I've only got a couple of other friends that I can have that conversation with at any time. And most of them don't live around me. So I do regular Zooms with them just so we can converse at this kind of stuff because, there's a certain thing that comes with being, it's a pride ego thing for me that comes with being one of the early people to cross the river. But when you do cross the river, all of a sudden, everybody is on the other side still. so I'm still like excited that we're having this type of conversation without having to explain all the little bits, just sharing all the beautiful expressions of how magnificent and expansive you are. I mean, it's wonderful.
Well, that's what we're going for. It is that when my own assignment is teaching the teachers is I will at some point I will not explain the alphabet to people. I will not do that anymore.
Right.
Because that's not where my joy is. My joy is I remember being in Tibet in a monastery, and I was teaching many lamas. And what I loved about those lamas were they were very dedicated and passionate and disciplined. And I didn't feel like a kindergarten teacher. We had to like chase people with a bamboo stick and say, "Hey, why are you not meditating? Why are you not doing shadow work? Why are you not?" Right?
Yeah.
This is not where my joy is. My joy is in the passion of finding those higher dimensions that I already experience in me, in others. And the challenge here is this, that the ego idea or the ego structure is very clever, because what it truly is looking for is identity. That's why, let's say, certain things are happening in the US where it's called identity politics. It's basically ego politics, but I'm not going to go into the detail here. Right? Yeah. And I was telling my students in Germany, in my Zen school back then, I was saying, if you leave this room a Buddhist, you haven't understood anything. We are here to free ourselves of identity, not to accumulate it. So when we accumulate identity, what happens is basically, how does identity happen? Identity happens when there's any type of experience, either psychological or physical, and we have an emotional reaction. Mm-hmm. This is when identity happens. This is when suffering happens. And
for me, it would be not having a complete emotional reaction. You have it, but then it passes and then you're back into the field. It's when you block the emotion from expressing, then it gets fixed, and that's when the identity sets in. That's how I understand it.
Bingo. That's crystallizing. So basically, when there is an emotional response, there's a crystallizing of identity. But you are correct. Energy can never be blocked. Every time we block energy, it's going to lead to something unhealthy. It's going to lead to a mental illness. It's going to lead to a physical illness. So the point is to experience the emotion so totally that it evaporates. And when someone is very well practiced, a great meditator, when they experience an emotion, it's a nanosecond and it evaporates and they're back in awareness. They're back in samadhi, so to speak.
That's what's been interesting for me is I've been dealing with the fear of writing, right? Because I've been writing and I've been dealing with it. So I do the traditional stuff. I know in, I check in, and I muscle test myself. Do I have any blocked emotions? And I'll get no. And I'm like, well, but I'm in the middle of this fear. And they're like, yeah, but you're processing it. You put your awareness on it and you continue doing what you're doing. And that's all that's necessary, because then it just gone. So that nanosecond, I'm like, oh, I want to get there.
It's also the local self that believes to hand something down from one generation to another needs to be done by writing. when I was in Nepal and I was speaking to the local people about why do they do certain spiritual ceremonies in a certain way, why dances in a certain way, and someone gave me a very simple answer, and they said in the past most of the people were illiterate, so writing wouldn't have worked for them. So the spiritual knowledge was hidden as a form of sacred geometry, for example, in dance in the Hindu temples. So they would hand it down from generation to generation intuitively by copying, for example, the dance, and they would perform sacred geometry without even knowing theoretically what they were doing. So there's a part of you, your local self needs to understand this, that your higher self will use energy to imprint this reality. And how effective that is, let me tell you this. In Nepal, I was with a friend of mine, a local yogi, and we went to a river, and I washed my hands in this river. And suddenly I had a vision of me as a Buddhist monk walking down to the exact same river with a big vase and getting water. The river remembered me.
Whoa.
It was
and you think
carrying...
the river flew past you, but no, it didn't flow past you. It flowed to where you are in the moment every time.
So that means all your actions, all your feelings, all the thoughts that you ever had, you imprinting this matrix. So even if your writing doesn't survive, all the souls that you interacted with in a loving way, they remember in their subconscious the imprints that you gave them. And if you practiced something of a higher nature that didn't violate the law of one, some form of white magic, for example, if you practice that in certain locations on the planet, when you go back to those locations, you get the downloads and the imprints. This is what happened with you in Egypt.
Cool.
Yeah, because your soul remembers Egypt. And Egypt remembers
that explains
you.
a lot. That explains a lot. Yeah. So it's funny because my wife and I have been invited to produce a TV show on Gnostic TV, and we're going to call it Becoming Awesome. And it's going to be different than most of the spiritual shows because each one is going to focus on a skill or an ability. And then we're going to explain it, and then we're going to transmit it. And one of the ones that's interesting that I've been gleaning more and more from is downloading information instantly, just knowing what I need to know when I need to know it. And I saw this wonderful video of these kids in Japan who learned how to do quantum reading. They would just take a book and go like this by the side of their head, which they didn't need to do, but they did the ritual, the gesture, and then they'd know the book. And so they could take a test on it. The book could be written in a foreign language and they could still pass a test on it. The book can be like a math book and then they can do the equations in it and stuff like that. And I'm like, so we want to transmit these abilities starting with, that's going to be one of our early episodes, knowing what you need to know when you need to know, just because it may not be answered instantly, but like you said earlier, you attend to it, you invite it in, it's going to come to you at some point. So we're going to be doing that. And I'm excited. And while I'm on this topic, I need to talk from the ego for a second, just so I can get it out of the way. That's to let you guys know that if you stuck with this conversation this far, that means you've got some juju. You've got some excitement and attachment, understanding of what's being discussed. And that's really cool. If you need any help with that, of course, you know where to go with Julian and learn to become a teacher. I'm going to have a book out very soon. You'll be able to find it on my website or in the link below the videos, to get that. And it's simple step by step. It's not quite the ABCs, but it's the next level up of, okay, I'm aware the stuff's available. How do I start getting into this flow more and make these connections more? And so I laid it out in a simple step. That's available. And then the last thing is, if you need a helping hand, just somebody to talk to tell you you're not crazy when this stuff happens, which is what a lot of people contact me for, is, both my wife and I offer one-on-one sessions, spiritual channel coaching and clearing. We'll sit with you to help you clear. And we do that on a donation basis. So that part's not about making money. That's about helping you. And if you want to give a donation, fine, we'll dance in the streets. And if you don't, we'll still dance in the streets. But you can check that out on my website, becomingawesome.one. Get more information, becomingawesome.one.one, not .com. Anyway, now I got that out of the way so I can not have my ego intruding the rest of the talk. Tell them all this stuff. Tell them already.
well, I wouldn't say that this is not the ego. You're just giving people coordinates in space-time if they need assistance, how to find those coordinates. That is wonderful. And it does serve the higher purpose. It doesn't come from a selfish place. It comes from a place of passion. It comes from a place of joy. Yeah. So I'm glad if I can delegate these things, if I if I don't have to navigate the local dimensions so much, if my team does it for me, I'm very happy and very grateful for that. So I can
see. I'm jealous. Team. I'm just starting to think about if things happen as spirit's telling me how big it's going to get, I'm going to need team. I'm like, okay, I'm allowing, come to me, please. I'll appreciate the help.
Peter, I would just tell you this. We will have a conversation after the conversation, if you don't mind. Right?
Good.
A private conversation. And then we can speak about certain passions in detail and see how certain things align or resonate. All right.
Cool.
What I wanted to ask you, you have a great love for cats, don't you?
Yes.
See, here's the beautiful thing. What I remember from Egypt, or parts of what I remember being a priest in a cat temple. And one of my favorite things was to get up in the morning, get 100 bowls out, and we always had exactly 100 cats. We would give the other cats away for adoption to the people because at the time, people were treating the animals very well, so we had no concern in giving them away. But we always had like 100 cats, and I remember getting the bowls out for the food, and the cats would come up with all their excitement and all their joy. And recently, I've experienced something very beautiful. We adopted cats here. We have around 6 cats in the house because we also want the temple that we're going to build. Also, it's going to be a cat temple as well. Nice. And the reason why it's going to be a cat temple is because we subconsciously remember those Egyptian lifetimes. And I was sitting outside here, I was meditating, was burning some incense. And one of my little kittens, who was just born, he was probably a month old, or like 2 months old. And he was watching the incense as if he was having deja vu. And I'm like, why is this little kitten watching the incense? So I'm sitting back, and I suddenly see in my third eye how he was watching the big cauldrons in the cat temple in Egypt and watching the incense coming from the cauldrons. And he used to sit on people when they had physical trauma, when they had psychological trauma. He was trained to sit on their injuries, either with connection with the body or with the energy body. And he would sit on them and purr and help them heal. And that's he came back to be a temple cat again.
So beautiful. Hang on a second. They always say leave sleeping dogs lie, but here's a little sleeping cat who's been sleeping at this whole interview. Anyway, he is a beautiful part of my life because I used to be highly allergic to cats. And, but my wife missed them. So when we got together, the cats had to go. And then after a few years, she basically said, I really miss these cats. And I said, that's okay. We're getting cats. So we got a nice couple brothers. And I just said, I'm going to love them until I'm no longer allergic to them. And that took 6 months at the time, but it was well worth it because now I have cats in my life and I get cuddles and hugs endlessly from these little purr balls, and it's softened me up in many, many ways. But to me, it was interesting too, the idea that something that represented ill health was something I invited in and said, you're welcome here in all your forms, ill health, until you're done. And 6 months later, I'm not allergic to cats.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Very, very fascinating.
I got to remember to do this for the other tree-borne allergies and stuff. I'm like, I did it with cats. I can do it with this other stuff. It's possible.
Yeah, it's in a way we're trying to understand those principles of creation, those laws of creation, and then we're trying to generalize them. trying to find out, oh, how does this apply in this situation? And there's sometimes this wonderful process of contemplation where we're sitting in our local mind, and I find that rather funny, because sometimes I try to be grumpy, I try to be depressed, I try to make it an exercise, and then some spirit is in my face and is cracking a joke, and it just, it's very hard to stay serious then. So it's like I try to play the game of being little, but it's just, we are not little. And it's sometimes the littleness, there is a belief that it benefits somehow. And this is what I see with many people that I work with, what I understand when you speak about emotional clearing. It is a form of trauma therapy where there is a re-experiencing without resistance, so it can be fully experienced. And the fractalization happens when someone does not want to fully experience, when they have some resistance towards pain or emotion. So they stop the process before the process can be completed. And when I see this energetically in people, they carry a karma body. They carry this from lifetime to lifetime, where when they had a certain trauma, that can be very intense. That, for example, for me and my wife, we had a re-experiencing of the Holocaust recently.
Wow, that's a lot.
There was a lot. We had some argument, and I felt helpless because I love her. So when I feel helpless, that's very, very good. That means my ego is in danger, and it should be in danger. So in that moment, I'm sitting in the shower, and I have this simple thought: whatever's going on with her, what right now she doesn't want to see, let me see it. And some of my teachers were suddenly there. I saw the holographic projection, and they were guiding me through this Holocaust experience. And I remember being a doctor in Germany, and my neighbors, I think, I don't know if they were my neighbors, but they were Jewish. And they got caught by the Nazis. But while some of the SS soldiers were dragging the family off, the mother looked at me, basically telling me telepathically, protect my daughter because she wasn't home.
Wow.
So her teenage daughter, I started hiding her in my office. And she was my twin flame, the same woman I am with today. She was 16 back then. And at one time I had these SS soldiers, they were knocking on my door, and they said, "We have heard you're hiding Jews." So I tried to get rid of them. And I said, well, there's a very high-ranking officer right now who's receiving private treatment. If you walk in on him, he's going to be very angry. And it worked for that moment. So they walked away because they were afraid of some sort of disciplinary measure. But one time she got sick, and I went out to get to the pharmacy to get medicine, and this is when they got her.
Wow.
And I remember we both died in Auschwitz. I remember how we went into the gas chambers. We were there at the same time.
Well, thank you, brother, for completing that, to take that energy off the planet, because those who have not completed it are the ones who just keep it stuck and keep us all and reenacting. And you know how they say history repeats itself because the energy keeps supplying it. So thank you for having the courage to complete that experience and share this with me.
I can tell you subjectively, for Julian, that was hard.
To
feel that again. To
well,
fully get that in his body.
You jump into the tiger's mouth. You're literally like, okay, I'm going to go in, rip me apart for a while. Now, I've learned in my process that I'm going to have 5 minutes or sometimes several hours of emotional pain, but I get a lifetime of relief. You know, when I'm working with a client and I'm trying to help them, and we do a life review and we look at all the instances in their life, and just that alone is helpful. But when we get to the point where I can try to help them to clear it, it's like, you know, this might take you a few hours. It might take you a couple hours every day for the next week, but weigh that against 20, 30, 40, 50 years of suffering.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to be done with it in a week. It's a bargain. Take the deal.
Yeah, Peter, that's a big one. That's a big one. And when I'm trying, like what you are doing, like our term for that is shadow work. So what we're basically doing, it's alchemy. That is actually what it is, but we call it
Oh,
shadow.
I see. I like alchemy way better. I don't like saying shadow work because it has that the word shadow. Alchemy. I'll do alchemy. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I accept that. So the idea is this, that we have this karma body that informs us about everything that we could not bring into forgiveness. And when we get reborn, or the illnesses that we have, the pains that we have, the mental issues that we are experiencing, so the way we approach it, I teach people body scan meditations. So they begin to investigate like the little hurts in the body, and to not move their awareness away from it, but to give it full awareness without creating a hardening in the body. So no fight or flight response. So through proper meditation, re-experiencing the pain, and then we start peeling it like an onion, layer for layer for layer. So at first, we would just do body scans where there is just a feeling of the symptoms in the body and the emotions that are connected to certain thought patterns. And at some point, through activation of the third eye, there might be flashbacks, there might be images of past lives or early childhood trauma, but there's a little bit of re-experiencing. And at some point, it's Kundalini yoga practice where we bring the past lives into the conscious mind. And then basically peeling the onion and leading to a re-experiencing. So the human then functions a little bit like a lightning rod. It lets all those forces that were unprocessed in other lifetimes, and yes, I agree with you on that. It's parallel. It's simultaneous. We say it in terms of past lives because it seems to make sense to the linear mind, but that's not what's happening. There's another dimension. There's another version of you that is having a different emotional experience. And for someone who has gone past the ego and is energetically touching the higher mind, what will happen is that suddenly all these beings are re-experienceable. What they couldn't finish, what they couldn't bring to forgiveness, we are now bringing to forgiveness. And the whole point about it is this, even though for the subjective psychology, it might feel very long. Like I've been doing this for probably 7 or 8 years now. I am sometimes physically very exhausted, I got to tell you, because all these things are being processed for Julian. Julian has to take it. It is what it is.
Right. We're in a human body right now. So that's the way it goes.
That's right, because the body is mirroring the karma back to us. It's like a learning device, and that's okay. And then the thing is, even though for the subjective self right now, it might take 10 years to clear this karma out. Well, but guess what? These are hundreds of years of karma, thousands of years of karma. So this current human is basically making the sacrifice for the higher good, for the higher purpose, by saying, okay, I'm willing to re-experience all this. So the totality of me doesn't have to go
story. I'm going to start telling that story. I try to tell my clients, what story are you going to tell that you came to the planet because not only did you know you can clear all this stuff from your field, but that you can then change the whole energy of the planet's field and help it uplift because you did your work. So now I'm going to add a new part to my story. I'm going to steal it from you, Julian. And I'm sitting there saying, and you may seem like it takes a long time, but this is tens and hundreds of thousands of years of clearing that you are doing in this one single lifetime. It's like rock and roll.
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive because if you think about it, like what we did in the team here when we arrived in Peru, there's a certain synchronicity with that. I remember the fall of Atlantis. I remember the different factions at the time, and we were with who you would call Master Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom. So what he could see it coming. He had visions of the downfall. So we went to Egypt because we realized Atlantis is going to go down. We got to preserve the mystical knowledge. So let's encode that knowledge through the pyramids, through certain temples, through certain types of writing that are symbolic on purpose. So not like for example, Arabian letters, or not like Latin letters, but like let's use a language of symbolism, because those who are psychic can
translation. Yeah, it won't get lost in translation.
Exactly. Yeah. So even later, centuries later, thousands of years later, those who are psychic and they can tune into the archetypes, they'll be able to read the hieroglyphics to remember the mystical teachings. And what happened basically that we went into exile. And now the synchronicity is that the same thing is happening again right now. So when we were in Germany, we could feel the disintegration of the Western system because we knew that the Western system or the Western mind is the Atlantean mind that is reincarnated. And we could feel it coming. And we got the intervention to go to Peru. Back then, we went to Egypt to create mystical schools. And now we were called to Peru to create mystical schools. Because those Atlanteans who know that what were coming, they were going to South America. They were building their temples and their pyramids there and hid secret knowledge in caves and so on. So that was the synchronicity. When we were here as a team and we first came together, we had to work through all the Atlantean trauma. We had to re-experience it so we could then channel the divine blueprint that we're supposed to bring forward. So the new systems of reaching up into higher dimensions and expanding. But for that, all the trauma needs to be cleared.
This is so cool is that it wasn't you as a person, it was you as a group who knew this, and then the group decided to do that. I mean, to me, it's rare that I see individuals who are willing to deal with their shadows, but to get a group of people together, that's extraordinary what you're telling me. And then, of course, something great like a wisdom school is going to come from it, of course.
Well, we are excited about this. I'm still working through my own concerns because in other lifetimes when I was teaching, there was a lot of corruption and I had to deal with a lot of corruption.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
And there is this knowledge, for example.
Even in this lifetime, I used to do politics a lot. I used to like be a political consultant. I got people elected, and then all the ideals that I was hopeful for, I'd watch them just get bought off and sold. And then I had the foolish thought that I'd run for governor of the state of New Mexico. So I did that a few years back, and because I thought I naively thought I could bring the light of consciousness to a dark place, and all I did was get pummeled. And just see how dark it really is. I mean, and this is how it goes, Julian. I'm like a nobody on the political scene, and I would still have people offer me money, bribes, and jobs, and all kinds of stuff to bring me on board. That's just how deeply rooted it was. But anyway, I'm done with all that playing. I'm now going to not messing with the darkness. I'm just projecting more light, and I'm much happier now. And listening to you talk is kind of interesting because it's clear to me that all the stuff you say ends up at the same place I end up. But how you get there is so interesting to me because it's like, I don't use any of the techniques you talk about. I don't even know what half the techniques you're talking about are. All I know is that I take people through a process that ends up in the same place. So I'm, and when I get the chance to come visit you in Peru, it'll be fun to actually witness and observe and maybe experience some of this, because then I'll expand more and go, oh, it's like, I love to dance, and it'll be like learning a whole new set of dance steps,
Peter, your higher mind is disagreeing with you. You know how to do it. It's just that Peter doesn't want to be very technical.
Yeah, well, that's it. I don't have the words yet. I don't have to explain. Do it this way, do it that way, do it in this order. Here's what you call it. I don't have any of that yet. And you're right. I do resist wanting that because I'm enjoying the idea of just, but I'm such a free spirit. I'm flowing in the wind.
Yeah, there's sometimes I don't know if but every time I don't know, I need to be careful because I do.
It's a good sentence. It's a good word to start with. I don't know. It's a great starting place.
But I think Julian does not know, but the totality of me does know. So when Julian needs to know, Julian will know. For a long time, there has been the belief that the higher knowledge cannot be put into a system and it cannot be conceptualized. Now, why was that belief there? It is deeply rooted, for example, in many Buddhist practices, that the idea is that the ultimate cannot be expressed. And yes, of course, the ultimate cannot be expressed conceptually in terms of something else. And yet, language evolves, our intelligence evolves. And because of the Atlantean trauma, where they messed with their minds in a scientific way, they had a little bit of reptilian help, shall I say. And dark AI that was present then and is present right now, and this dark AI is trying to use certain injections to incarnate into the body by creating a hive mind or collective matrix, and using that technology to try to enslave the souls.
Yes. Why become one with God when you can become one with us, and we'll just tell you what to do?
Yeah, exactly. And why look at real trees? You know, if you can have the Facebook metaverse and look at fake trees, you know, it's why not have that? So point being is that there was such a damage done to the Atlantean mind. So what you see in the West is this extreme intellectualization, which leads to basically a firewall where things cannot be experienced anymore because the mind is constantly conceptualizing. And let's say if you ask someone about a tree, they'll tell you, well, it's a tree, it does osmosis, it does photosynthesis, it does this, but they have no experience of the tree whatsoever. They have a story about the tree. So the issue
the
is,
story.
Exactly. So they're seeing it through a conceptual framework, but they have no direct experience of it. And that was the issue with many of the Atlanteans that were traumatized. They had enhanced their intellect to such a degree that they could not perceive reality anymore. So they were suddenly closed off in a separate box, trapped in there. This was the original creation of the current ego as we know it. It's this intellectual separate mind. And instead of realizing that they screwed up, they went for more augmentation, they went for more enhancement, so for more perversion, more distortion, more disconnecting from God. So in order to get those people into some sort of experiencing, the best thing is to give them methods and not explanations, because when you give them explanations, they begin thinking, and they never get into meditation. But for those who are already well practiced, we can begin conceptualizing and downloading certain systems of divine understanding because it's not confusing. When you read it with your higher mind. So when you create a system, that system doesn't have to be rigid, but it is an understanding of drawing a map of how to reach God. So when you draw that map can assist other beings. When they're not beginners, when they're initiated to some level, when they read it with their higher mind. So they will not get confused and overthink. They will more have a feeling of resonance and deja vu.
Yeah. That'll be like your diploma is when you take the map and you burn it. This got me here. Now I'm here. That'd be nice. I want to talk about an experience I've been having recently that kind of was brought up by what you were describing going on in Atlantis. So the people we call the Greys, all right, the Zeta Reticuli. My understanding is they're us, all right, that they're the timeline of us that went down the road who are doing what you were describing about becoming the inoculated with the nanotech to become the hive mind, to become that. So they went that route, and they realized it wasn't working. So they came back because they understand time enough to do that. And that's why we had all the abductions and stuff like that, because they were trying to physically figure it out and they couldn't get there with it. All right. So that was my understanding. So I started doing this group consciousness meditation weekly with my people. And we would always invite in any entity of high frequency who is in service to love and light, who was in alignment with what we're trying to manifest and hold our focus on. And so we get all kinds of wonderful gods, goddesses, solar systems, novas show up occasionally, all kinds of stuff. It's fantastic. Anyway, so this one guy was more aware of who was there than I was. And he said, oh, the Greys are here. And I'm like, well, get the hell out of here. Is what I would say to them. I don't want you around. Get out of here. And I know that if you draw a boundary, that's it. It's, you're sovereign. If you create a boundary, that's it. And so, but I also have a thing where I said any entity that wants to talk to me can ask. All right. So they couldn't come to our meditation, but they'd ask this friend about how, if they could talk to me. So I said, okay, I'll go talk to you guys. So I talked to them, and they're like, we are very, very interested in what you're doing in your group consciousness, because you're able to actually become connected in ways that we've been cut off from, and we've been trying to get to through physical manipulation and through more what you were saying earlier about, let's add on layers of technology and all this other genetic manipulation. But you're just getting there to source, and we're starting to realize we lost that from ourselves, and we would like to get more of that. So I brought it to the group and I said, hey, the Zetas want to come join us. And they're like, no, scared, you back. And I'm like, okay, sure. It's group does what the group wants to do. But I thought it was very, very interesting that even entities that we would write off as being totally disconnected from their divine selves, totally going the transhuman route to the extreme, to where they realize it's a dead end and come back and try to fix it, even they're starting to realize that there's opportunities to find connection and healing. And I just thought that was interesting. I just wanted to share that because it came to my mind when you were talking.
It is very interesting. I had some contact with the Grays as well. There were several other alien entities that came forward to me, some Syrians, some Andromedans. And they would show their culture, they would show their spiritual practices. But the Grays, they had a different intention with me. They didn't ask me anything. They formulated a very simple wish, and it was a beautiful wish. They said, please tell the people, if they don't equally spiritually evolved as they are evolved in technology, it's going to lead to a catastrophe. So they were a different group of the Grays. Yeah, they wanted to make it very clear, like, we made the mistake, please evolve spiritually first as your primary source of information before you start developing technology, because here is the difficulty. What the Atlanteans got wrong is once they start enhancing their minds to be more intellectual, the difficulty is this, that they created a separate mind that was incapable of feeling subtle matter. And when you're incapable of feeling subtle matter, what happens is you're blocked out of cosmic Wi-Fi. So you don't get your divine updates. Yeah, you don't get your system upgrades because you become insensitive to that. Now, they had this phantom pain, like as if you lose a limb and it's still there. And they try to use technology as a surrogate for divine initiation. And of course, it could not work. Yeah. They try to have machines between their perception and the finer dimension, so to speak. So they would use machines in order to detect that. But the key point that was essential in Atlantis was this very, very simple statement, know thyself. So we moved from an outward practice where we're using crystals and technology to an inward practice. We became meditators. This was the birth of the yogis, actually, in Atlantis. So many of those yogis that I'm communicating with, they share Atlantean memory, they share Egyptian memory, or there were Tibetan monks in the Himalayas. It's always the same people, by the way. Yeah, there are people thinking, oh, they're like 1,000 of enlightened masters. No, they're like 50, and they're always coming back in different bodies. One time the Tibetan, then the Hindu, but it's the same guys. So the issue is the separate mind. Once the separate mind dissolves through acceptance of the separate mind cannot find any conflict. And I try to explain that to people in this way. If you're in a skyscraper and you want to get to the top floor, but you're having an argument on one of the floors in some sort of office, if you don't accept that you're having an argument, you're stuck in the argument. But if you accept you're having
never
an argument,
right?
Yeah. Then forgiveness happens, get in the elevator.
I always say that whenever you're in that conflict with somebody, no matter what it is, that's a sign that both you and that person's elevator get off on the same floor.
Yeah, exactly. So is the mind. If we have a conflict with the mind, if we don't allow the mind to be conflicted, we enhance the conflict. Now we're stuck on that floor. So the point is that the Atlanteans need to forgive the mind in order to tune into the higher mind that will then begin through higher light codes, begin impacting the neurology. And what I have experienced in meditation, that when there were certain fears towards the higher dimension, I would have conversations with angels or with certain master teachers, and from the perspective of the local mind, their perfect logic was simply superior to the fear system that the local mind had. So at some point, the local mind realized it is in its own interest to reduce activity. Because why should I analyze a situation? Why should I struggle for understanding? Why should I go through more suffering if I can just drop the locality, let the higher mind take over and give me instantaneous understanding of what needs to be done without me having to struggle for knowledge or wrestle for knowledge? So then we begin understanding, oh, the locality is actually the fear of death, is the sense of separation, and the fear of death is the fear of God. When God is ultimately you, but you're creating a barrier towards who you are. So then we begin accepting the separateness through meditation, not reacting to the separateness anymore. And when we stop reacting to it, we stop giving it energy. Because how do we fuel conflict? By giving it conflict. Well, if I don't give it conflict, it doesn't receive fuel. And then the ego literally begins dying. You can watch it die in meditation. It will scream, it will kick. It will say, I'm dying, don't let me die. And you watch and you meditate and meditate and meditate. And through the non-reaction, it starves of energy. And at some point, it just pops. That's the Zen Buddhist way.
Yeah. So I just want to take a moment to address people who are listening right now, because while you were speaking for the past several minutes, Julian, I just got thrown into a very, very nice place of the lack of separation, being with the universal mind or whatever you choose to call it. And it was just nice just from listening to your words and being in this connection with you. And I realized that many, many people listening to this on the recording on the YouTube channel are going to start to notice that maybe they're connected as well. So I just want to just take a moment to tell everybody listening, just breathe for a minute. Just know that you've been receiving a transmission that's been both words from Julian and I, but also energetics. And just focus on that for a moment, because it's there for you. And I think that, I'm just so happy to be able to say that. And you may even want to pause this for a couple of minutes and just breathe with your eyes closed, and then come back. We'll still be here. But I wanted to pass that on.
Well, of course, and for those who want to directly speak to you, of course, in spirit, we're always talking. We're either aware of it or we're not. But like, if human wants to meet human, they have the possibility. I remember your website, becomingawesome.one. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, .one. Yeah. Yeah.
The beautiful thing is, and that there needs to be an understanding that those of us who have tuned into the higher mind, that we're not special. There's nothing special about us.
See, hang on a second. My ego's screaming, oh, yes, I'm special. But now that I got that out, I could sit there and go, and so is everybody else, because we're all sparks of God. That's what is special about us. We're not that we're different. You and I and everybody are the same. We just know we're sparks of God. So you're correct. There's nothing different. But my ego.
The only difference is the lack of amnesia. That's all. And it's important to understand that, for example, if someone speaks to this entity and there would be a channeling taking place, or someone speaks to you, Peter, and then channeling would be taking place, they're actually hearing their own voice just through somebody else's body.
Yeah. See, when I started doing this, a friend of mine, a mentor, said, just when you do a channeling session with somebody, ask to speak directly to their sacred higher self. Just cut through and just go right to them. And so now, even though it's me translating and making sounds come out of my mouth, it's their source speaking. And I've had it happen so many times where I know I'm doing something. This is crazy why I'm even saying this. And then they'll stop and go, I did some automatic writing this morning, and they'll read to me exactly what I just spoken. Okay, so
Yes.
stuff like that happens all the time, and I'm like, okay, so this isn't crazy stuff. This is, you make that connection and you hear your own inner voice, your own divine, antriyaman is the word I used. You hear that through somebody else's mouth, and then it's just boggling to understand that you're so deeply connected. And sometimes in this 3D human world, we need a little bit of that encouragement to just have somebody else tell us it's okay. And even though it is our own voice telling us, you know?
Yeah, and there's something when it comes to that, what I see with many spiritual practitioners or those who are curious, there is a high degree of frustration, because now we see many are awakening, channeling is happening, certain abilities are manifesting. Some abilities cannot be shared publicly for very good reasons, but many who are of benefit will be shared in the public domain. And there is the idea of the story, others can do it, I cannot do it. And this is exactly what the Matrix is. The Matrix is telling you, you are not divine, you cannot do it, others are special, you are special in your misery, that's why you're especially miserable.
I'm so good at it. So let me tell you two things that I enjoy. One is a long time ago, I got sober and I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I turned what you just said on its head. I thought, there's no way I can recover because I wasn't sick enough. These people are all super bad, and there's no way I'm ever gonna get past because I'm not sick enough, right? So rather than not being special enough, I wasn't bad enough. And then I realized later in life that, until you recognize that we all have a desire for significance, and that was important for me because I stopped trying to do it through unconscious means and recognize that I'm a human. I want to be recognized. Okay. And so until I got clear on my desire for significance, one of the ways I got significance was, if I can't be the best at something, I will be the worst at something. So I will tell the story, poor, pitiful me, nothing good ever happens. I'm always having no money. And so if I couldn't get my significance from being magnificent, I got it from telling the victim story, which of course the Matrix is there to help you tell.
Yeah, totally. This is exactly what the demonic is. The demonic's job is to offer you identity. And the ego is there as a replacement of the divine sovereignty. And it is attractive to us if we have a certain desire. And the example that I usually give, it's a very simple example. Imagine you being born and you're like, you're a little kid, you're 6, 7 years old, and you suddenly channeling your higher self into art. But your dad's a lawyer, and the only way he can relate to you if you are into law. So the child makes a subconscious decision: I'm going to suppress my higher self, I'm going to hide my artistic interests, and I'm going to pursue a career of law so I can have the law from my father. And this is where we make choices to dim our light. And when we want to dim our light, the dark is saying, okay, you want to dim your light so you can fulfill a certain desire that is of the ego. And then it says, okay, I give you this identity of lawyer. Well, you're going to have to pay with depression and panic attacks when you go to the lectures, but you get the law from your father. And then we are adding heavy material to ourselves that's being offered by the demonic side. And this is how it works. So then at some point we realize, all right, I have renounced myself, because as my authentic self, I was under constant assault in this society. And that was too painful. So I made a choice to dim my light so I could somewhat relate to people. But when we start awakening, we completely start reverse engineering this. We're going back, we start removing the dark matter by re-experiencing the traumas, and we find those keynotes of decision-making where we choose to dim our light, and then we choose to do the opposite. So we call the light back in.
Yeah. I really enjoyed what you said about the deal with the devil. And we don't even realize it. We think we're being fine, upstanding citizens and just doing what we're told and doing what society prescribes for us. But meanwhile, we've sold literally sold who we were. We turned our back on our authentic self. And of course, it's going to lead you to that wall eventually. But till then, you get to enjoy butting your head as much as you want to. But that's why I'm so glad we're in the golden age. And people tell me stuff like, oh, how many lifetimes have you been around? You can go to psychics and they'll tell you that. And when I first heard how many, I was like stunned, and then I finally had abilities manifest in myself, and I could just check in and see, yeah, that's a lot. I've been around the block here. And but it's interesting, from our perspective, we're excited, at least I think you are, but I certainly are excited to be at this point in time where the ascension energies of the planet are such, the energetic fields of the solar system and the galaxy are such that we're going to see this big uplift in consciousness and humanity. And
Yes.
A lot of those different timelines are going to come together in a beautiful way. For a lot of the people that we work with, they don't understand that they just bought the ticket. They bought a all exclusive VIP pass to Disneyland. They get to go on all the rides, and they're going to be super fun. And they get behind the scenes access. They don't understand. They just see, oh, it's a burden. It's so hard out there. Like, no, this is the best. The best darn show in the galaxy, and you get to be not only in the front row watching it, you get to be an author writing it.
That's the thing. I remember my dear friend Alan Watts used to say, we conned ourselves into the idea that the present moment is ordinary. Right? When in truth,
beautiful.
Yeah, we're here co-creating this beautiful experience, and what is actually what the ego tries to turn into a burden is the mercy of God. Because when you get to experience, for example, your past life traumas, it means that the mercy of God has no mercy towards your ego, because your ego is an illusion and it keeps you imprisoned. So when those forces come in, and this is exactly what people are afraid of when they identified with the body and the mind, they know when those forces come in, there will be a dissolving of the borders of identity. So when that happens, you will go through 1,000 deaths. Yeah, you will peel snakeskin after snakeskin after snakeskin of yourself. And it will feel like death over and over. But at the end is the complete freedom from limitation. So we're going through these trials, which are not really trials in the way that people understand, that they think of it in a negative way, in terms of karmic retribution. No, we get to have a loving understanding about everything that we ever experienced. And the whole point of re-experiencing trauma is not to re-experience trauma. The point is to generate wisdom from the re-experiencing. And once we generate wisdom, our energy frequency changes.
Yeah. See, the way I understand it, because I don't like using words like, your body can go through all these deaths and these ego deaths, because that's too scary. So I don't want to go there. Right.
Oh, I don't mind scary.
I know. Well, you can see you wore the black and I wore the white today. So it's perfectly balanced. Okay. But anyway. So the way I like to describe it is that the universe and God is beneficent, it's benevolent. And by design, it's created a homeostasis mechanism when you get off kilter by not fully experiencing something and the energy get trapped, then you automatically draw karma. You automatically draw to you more opportunity to clear that experience. So when things keep happening over and over, why do I keep getting divorced? Why do I keep falling behind? Why does it keep happening? It's the universe, God, trying to tell you, hey, look, you're holding a block energy, and so you got no choice but to attract this. So let's focus on it and clear it. But I don't like to use the words of that it's going to be, that it's an ego death. It is, of course, but I like to sit there and say it's a gift. It's the universe being so beneficent that you're not trapped in hell forever, even though it seems like it in 3D real time sometimes. You're not trapped in hell forever. You're always given the key to your own prison cell. Moment after moment, you're just given it. And to me, that's just how beneficent and benevolent the universe, God is.
Ultimately, that is very, very correct. The reason I'm speaking the way I'm speaking is because those beings that I will teach down the line need to be beings that are not easily scared. For the initiations that they will receive, if they get scared of the idea of ego death, if they get scared, I'm not the right, let's say the right catalyst for them, then they need to find somebody else. But
I had a teacher tell me about some initiations in Egypt, and I just asked Spirit while we were talking, is this really true, or is this guy just blowing steam? And you go, yeah, it happened. But at the higher levels of initiation in Egypt, they would put you in a sarcophagus for a while, just so that you could go into a theta state. And if you did that, you could last 6-7 days before you ran out of air. But if you freaked out and panicked, you'd die. And another one is they throw you in a pool full of alligators. Right. And the only way out of this room and this pool full of alligators was to swim down through it all and under a wall to the other side where you can get out. So you had to go literally deep into your fear to get to the other side.
yes.
And then the other example of the sarcophagus, you had to be calm and measured in the face of what is certain doom to be able to be of the higher level. So I totally get what you're saying. I'm just like so glad that I'm not having to experience that in this lifetime.
Well, the beautiful thing is, if we choose to experience it internally, energetically, we don't have to have a physical experience of it.
I want that. I want that.
Yeah, that's the key. It is only that we have this repetition of cyclic karmic effects in the physical when we don't want to feel, when we don't want to turn inward, when we don't want to experience the karmic reasons why we're being mirrored in such a way. So the whole point of shadow work or alchemy or the transmutation of these past life traumas is to not have to re-experience it. So what you said about the divine property, and that's very beautiful. It is simply that we may accept in our delusion that we are trapped. And how does that show? In being comfortable, in staying safe. This is how it shows. So when we are accepting our prison, we get comfortable. But the beautiful thing is God never accepts our prison, ever. Yeah. That's why nothing goes smooth in our prison until we are willing to realize freedom. There's another thing that you said that was very important about your experience with alcoholism. I recently I had an encounter in the Andes Mountains. There's a cave where I meditate in. That location I will not share with the people. There are reasons for this. But I met Babaji in the cave. As a holographic experience, he showed up in front of me, and I asked him, how do I teach people faith? And he looked at me, and in a very childlike manner, he was dangling his feet from a cliff. And he said, Julian, you don't need to teach them faith. You just need to help them remember. And then he said this, and this blew my mind. He said, don't you understand that they are made of pure faith? And I'm looking at him like, what do you mean? He said, every one of them is immortal. That means God poured his whole faith into every single one of them.
Whoa.
You would have to be a fool to do that if you wouldn't believe that creation is perfect. And a fool, he is not.
Mm. Oh, yes.
So the fact that our essence is immortal means that God has complete faith in us. That was a big one for me.
The big one for me, I'm silent. I'm usually a natterer, and here I am just going, oh, yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you. Oh.
Sometimes I feel embarrassed in front of my old friends because I feel so much when they speak, you know. There was another thing one time, and I think you'll love this one. There was a group of angels coming to me in meditation, and they said, we're going to give you a prayer now. And this is the map of how to return to God. So listen closely. And I started hearing this prayer, because you are a channeler as well, that you get a multidimensional information in terms of energy, but it's being condensed down into language. So I had to choose how I translated this. Yeah, but I tried my best in translating this. So the prayer goes like this. In God, I disappear. In love, I dissolve. In compassion, I am one. In forgiveness, I am free. In joy, I am home.
Sweet. That's a beautiful prayer. Say that again so I can repeat it and lock it in my mind.
I can send it to you, but I can also repeat it. So, in God, I disappear.
In God, I disappear.
In love, I dissolve.
In love, I dissolve.
In compassion, I am one.
In compassion, I am one.
In forgiveness, I am free.
In forgiveness, I am free.
In joy, I am home.
In joy, I am home. Oh, yeah, those words felt good. Boy, the energetic frequency of my body turned up a couple more little tiny bubbles going when I said that.
It's already
Thank you.
in you, otherwise it wouldn't resonate.
Yeah, but still, it's nice to have words for it. Thank you. While we're sharing prayers, let me share my favorite prayer. Whenever I work with somebody, I share this prayer. Tell them it's the most powerful prayer ever. Super, super powerful prayer. Goes like this. Thank you. More, please.
Can you repeat?
Thank you. More, please.
This falls under the category "Smite Me Harder, God."
Yeah. Well, that's what the smiting is. Thank you. Yeah, I'll have another, sir, but not like that. Usually, you say it when the good stuff happens. Right? Oh, it's like you pray for $1,000 and you find a dime in the street, right? Ooh, thank you, more, please, rather than oh, only one lousy dime. But yes, thank you, more smiting, please. Oh,
yeah, it is sometimes to ask to let the subjective self endure so we all can be free. Whatever needs to be endured for the highest good.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've always learned is, a hero, a warrior does what is necessary. It's not like you have courage or you fight or you do this or you do that. It's none of that. It's you do what is necessary. And in a lot of cases, it's enduring. And those of us who signed up for this lifetime, this is not an accident. There's no accident of birth. Those of us who signed up for this lifetime knew that we were on the big Disneyland ride. This was going to be ascension for the whole planet at once. And so there was going to be a lot of that shadow that we're going to be enduring. And if you take it like, okay, if you want to pump yourself up, which I like doing, it's like say, oh yeah, I am the chosen because I chose this. I am the chosen, and I'm on the planet here, and we're fighting the good fight because this is the time where it's going to happen. Not that you fight, but you know what I say. Yeah,
it's also like a change. I feel in the understanding of sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice that our subjective self has is the idea of loss, of losing something.
Yeah, right.
But sacrifice in its original meaning means to make holy.
Oh, I didn't know that. Make holy.
So we are going through this alchemy, through this transformation to make something holy. And that's the sacrifice.
That's very beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing that you think about it. Like when I was writing that book, I got very, very clear that I was standing on the shoulders of giants. That for the people who came before me, even the generation that I learned from, my teachers, those monks, and everybody, they had a denser energy that they had to transmute within themselves just to be able to become the teachers to help me. I'm in a lighter space, right? And I'm going through as much suffering as I can, I guess as is out there. And I'm able to do that because they went through the forest first. They were the ones with the machete in the jungle, cut the path for me. And so when we think about this collective and the clearing that we're doing, I mean, there's so many. You talk about the ascended masters. I've had the pleasure of meeting two great beings in person in my life, in the physical. All right. One wasn't quite in the physical because it was an entity in another person's body, but the other one was an avatar in flesh, like the ability to raise the dead kind of stuff. And you think that's only myths and legends and Bible stories, and only one can do that. But these people have been on the planet a lot of different lifetimes. That just so that we could enjoy. And there's so much joy, even though it is a slog, and even though it is hard a lot, there's so much joy because each moment of transmutation, that moment of alchemy, as using your word, is like honey. It's like ambrosia gets placed on my tongue because I just finished the experience and there's nothing left except connection to source that used to be a blockage. And it's like, oh. And yeah, and then a lot of the ego stuff just slips away because a lot of what I used to worry about just doesn't bug me anymore. And then a lot of the problems that are still ongoing are easier. It's like, oh, some money would be handy right now. Shows up, kind of stuff, and yeah, so we're blessed and it's beautiful. But yeah, it is an awareness that we chose to be the warriors, to do what is necessary.
But to share something intimate with you, when you speak about that, for me that is actually quite heavy, because the people that you spoke of, the people with the machete, I was those people many times
in your other lives. Yeah,
and I feel that, and it's like there's a
thank you,
weariness of
because
the
I'm
soul.
standing on your shoulders. Thank you. I'm standing on your shoulders. I was a freeloader, right? Okay. I've had a lot of past life, but I always hung out on the periphery. I was there when Christ got killed. I was there when Ezekiel ascended. I was there when, Gandhi did this. And I was there at all these different, but I was always lurking on the edge, just kind of, watching all the masters, like who you were, doing their thing. Okay. And finally, now it's come together enough where I was allowed to just sit in your presence often enough that now I'm okay. I'm going to step out and do this. But I'm standing on shoulders of giants, and I'm so grateful.
That's very wonderful, Zulia. There's a part of me who really enjoys meeting you, and we can later explore why. We could see how we know each other, because we definitely do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I picked that up 20 minutes ago in our conversation. Oh, yeah. There was this time and that time, but I'm not yet. I'm sure it's going to develop more as I focus on it, yet clearly see it. I just can sense the energetic field where we've been together and kind of locales and stuff like that. But I'm unfolding. So I'm thinking meeting you is going to help with that unfolding even more.
And I think in terms of compassion, again, the idea that, yes, God put his full faith in us, but nobody's special in comparison, because we're all that special one. There's nobody special in the idea of separateness or in their own dimension. One time I got really upset with some people, and I wanted to have compassion for myself. It's like, how can I not be so hard on Julian, because Julian is feeling in a certain way about certain people, and Julian wants to be in a state of forgiveness but doesn't know how to do it. And I saw a famous scene that people know, that was often spoken about. It was an experience that Gandhi had with a British officer. So this British officer walks in, and the British officer wants to deliver the demands from the government. He doesn't want to have a conversation with Gandhi. But Gandhi overwhelms him with kindness, offers him tea, offers him British cookies, and at some point, suddenly the officer realizes he has been speaking with Gandhi for 5 hours. And he comes out transformed and an ally to the freedom of the Hindus, or the not only Hindus, of course, the whole of India, but he becomes an ally. And people look at that as some sort of superhuman feat that Gandhi did. But what upstairs allowed me to see is how angry Gandhi was with the British officer. He was very angry.
Wow.
He was very angry with him, but he didn't let his ego take control. Like his ego was like rebelling, is like this barbarian, this obnoxious, primitive barbarian. But he would allow himself to go through that, to let the subjective human experience, the I illusion, go through that and not to act from it. And I find this a beautiful anecdotal piece because it shows that even Gandhi struggled in that moment. So when you know that, can't you see yourself with kindness then?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is a level of self-mastery that I'm aware of, but I've not fully embodied. So when I'm actually working with people and stuff, I tell them almost what seems the opposite, because based on the level they're at, I figure given your level of consciousness, there's nothing else you could do, right? I always tell people, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. If you're going to leave the room, kick a few chairs over on the way out, right? And so don't beat yourself up for having express it fully, and then afterwards go in and see what's motivating that. All right. So I'm not at the level where I'm with people who, if they're annoying, I walk away. I just don't do that. I don't have the greater good in mind. I just like, oh, too much, gotta go. And so that's kind of how I am, And but what's as a result of the process that I followed, I'm in that state less and less. There's very few people I'm around who trigger those things in me. And so I could see them. I would get bored maybe, but I wouldn't actually be in the place of holding the anger towards them, because I think I've allowed myself to be that grizzly often enough.
The key to understanding triggers is very, very simple. Every time we judge, it's a projection of our shadow. There's something these people are doing that we have done in other lifetimes. And when we still have shame about that, it triggers.
Don't you hate that saying, when you point at somebody, 3 fingers point back? Don't you hate that?
I don't know that saying because I'm German.
Oh, that's in America. You point at somebody else, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Right. Okay. I kind of seem to get the gist. All right. Well, it's always self-attack. I recently had the experience with my twin when we were arguing.
Yeah.
And I feel into it. I am allowed to share this. We were arguing, we were accusing each other of something. And then Yeshua appeared and he was sitting with us. And he made me feel my twin as she is me.
Ooh.
So in that moment, I could feel we are one being experiencing 2 bodies, but we are actually one being, and everything that we say to each other is actually self-attack. Because when somebody is your twin flame, you are essentially one soul, but you're experiencing different bodies.
Wow. That whole concept boggles me. I can't even wrap my head around the idea of that, even though I'm talking to somebody who's in the middle of it. It's like, wow.
It gets funny then. You start laughing.
Yeah.
Because it's silly to point fingers at
argument with yourself.
Yeah, it's silly.
Fighting with yourself, but you get to see them physically react. Whoa. It's like I had trouble with the concept that earlier we were talking about fractals, all the past lives, but there's current lives. I had trouble with the idea that not only are there current lives and different timelines, what we call past and future, but there's current lives now that are multiple. I've had trouble wrapping my head around the idea that I'm on the planet. Every time I check in, I get around 5 times. There's 5 aspects of my soul expressing on Earth right now. And I haven't even, I'm boggled and somewhat scared to actually connect and speak to all my greater self. There's a fantastic TV show that I enjoyed so much on Netflix. It was called Sense8, Sense, and the number 8. And they even had a German character, but there's 8 people from around the world who wake up one day to the same consciousness. They all know that they're the same consciousness. And so they all have each other's skills and abilities. So when one person needs to fight, the one who knows how to fight fights. The one person needs to drive, then the driver drives. It's like just wild stuff. And it's a beautiful concept in that idea. And so it's been floating around the edge of my consciousness. I haven't dove into it yet, but it still amazes me that, when I hear you talk about a twin flame, it's like one soul, 2 persons right there connecting. And I'm thinking, we're so much bigger and more magnificent than I even allow myself to comprehend.
But it cannot be imagined in any way. It can only be, how to describe this? In a way, the higher mind does all the processing, and the higher mind can give us, let's say, a trailer to a movie of who you are, but cannot give you the full movie because it would fry the human nervous system. There's no way, if someone does not have a very advanced yogi system, like nervous system, like certain yogis have, the voltage that needs to run through our system to experience this simultaneous multiplicity of dimensions in which you also have experience. If your nervous system is not modified in a very particular way, that energy cannot be held.
Yeah, it's like that lady I met who laughed for several weeks on end because that was the best she could do to process it. And what I enjoy the fact is that we're upgrading. And so this ascension that we're going is the level of consciousness, but our bodies are going to come along too. I've had some insight, and I've listened to other people talk about what our bodies are going to look like in several hundred years when we have more in place to process that amount of energy. And it's
some of us will not have bodies.
Exciting. Yeah, most who want to go to that energetic realm, but those who, I'm still like, all physicality, I want to play here for a while more.
I like this sandbox.
I do, and I want to play in it where I'm the master of joy instead of the master of misery. I want to spend some lifetimes doing that,
Where the misery is the joy is the misery. Who has the difference?
That's because you're just so going zen on me right now.
What I'm saying is the awareness of one creates the awareness of the other.
True. But yeah, I still like, I love physical pleasures. I make it a point to go to the beach several times a year for several weeks, just to be in that environment of, the physical pleasure of the wind and the sand and the surf and the sun and all that beautiful stuff. And, to take that analogy, it's like, I want to come to the planet of Earth when it's in 5D as a planet, as opposed to just an energetic being. I want to go play in that sandbox for a while.
Yeah. What's funny to me, in a beautiful way, a part of you is nervous about writing. But do you know how many are listening right now? Yeah. How many witnesses are there right now? Just in this conversation. I can feel them. I can see some of them.
Right. Yeah. Whenever I do a channeling that I record, my sacred self knows who's listening in there and stuff. And I tap in. I don't ever really get like a number count or something, but I can energetically feel like waves of energies from different groupings and different individuals who show up. I'm like, because this is all new to me. I don't know how long you've been playing in this realm, but I've been having channeling abilities at this skill level for just a little over a year now. And
isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I know. And I've been doing enough teaching of other things in the past that, it's easy for me to condense massive amounts of information and simplify it. So, curriculum writing, teaching teachers, I know how to do that. And so it's fun to apply it all. And but yeah, it's like some of the things you talk about, I understand and I can hang with you in the conversation, but I don't have experience of it yet. At least not, I mean, you have all the experience you want if I open up and say, okay, let me allow this knowledge to come to me. But half the time, Julian, I don't even know what to open to ask to see that experience. It's a beautiful unfolding. It's my dance and my journey, and I'm happy, super, super happy. But it's like so uplifting, like I said earlier, to be in conversation with you, because this is how it is. The more of us who I tell people all the time, tribe, find your tribe. People who are at this level with you and can go on this journey with you, because they will reinforce the new steps you're taking when you're being scared about leaving where the ego was. They're with you. And when I talk to you, it's like, more tribe. Thank you, God.
That is wonderful. I remember the first being who ever gave me a platform was a writer and a yogi. His name was Gerald Clark. And Gerald Clark was an electrical engineer, and he started scientifically explaining all these multidimensional experiences, and he was very much into pre-astronautic and so on. And when we met, he also had this feeling, I've met someone more in the frequency band of what I am experiencing. And I remember the statement from Timothy Leary, find the others. Well, there's something very specific that the divine wants to express. And it's basically like this. If you imagine that you have one river that is the source of all, and it starts spreading into a delta, certain deltas are blocked. So the water, without exerting massive effort, will find a way around the blockages. And God is trying to reach into the human consciousness. And in my experience, what it is like is that it's basically that Julian is just like a glove, and a hand is putting the glove on, and then the glove becomes an extension of the hand. So the higher mind at that moment completely replaces the local mind. There is no Julian in that experience. There's no psychological experience of that. But there's a speaking from the higher mind and from what we could consider Holy Spirit. Certain laws and certain physics are in place. And what our team here in Peru is called, it's called the Lighthouse. And
cool.
There's a very particular symbol connected with that. And it's the idea of a yogi meditating, and he's merging with a lighthouse. So where the light would come from the lighthouse is where the pineal gland is. And you see basically that the top of the lighthouse is the illuminated pineal gland from the yogi. And the idea is we simply radiate the God force out, and it brings the ships into the harbor. Like, you don't have to come down to them. You don't have to go to the beach. You don't have to chase them down. You don't have to educate them.
They're going to see that and be attracted. Yep. Yeah. Beautiful.
So we're going to build that lighthouse.
You're helping me a lot, because I turned out the first draft of this book. I've got some readers working on it now. We're going to give me some feedback. But I had a lot of trouble describing mind. All right. And I was trying to use a capital M and a lowercase m when I would write the word mind. And then what you just started talking about, local mind versus higher mind, I'm like, oh God, those are so much simpler. So I'm stealing some words from you. They're going to go in the book.
They're not my words, so it's fine. You can steal them.
Okay. It's I'm just giving you credit that I'm going to be a thief and happily take yours. But so I'm going to be using those words when I do my edits before I send it off to get published.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, thank you.
By the way, I don't have a sense of time, and you probably don't have a sense of time because it's very fun. I'm just gonna.
We've been at this for 2 hours, so I think it's probably time to bring it to a close.
I would say so, and not because we're ending it, but it's because there are ways of packaging information and energy. And when the current service is done, we're allowed to relax. You're allowed to go to your beach. My beach is somewhere else on a different planet. I sometimes meditate on that.
Oh, nice. Well, it's like this for everybody who's listened, for whatever, if you break this up into segments or just do the whole 2 hours, for those of you who listened, get in touch with Julian, get in touch with me, because we're connected. Obviously, you're spending some time, and we both sense that in the field right now. And so thank you for being present, and get in touch.
It's time for the joy. There have been hundreds and thousands of years of very hard spiritual work. I've been coming down here as a matrix buster for thousands of years.
Matrix buster, good word.
Call it spiritual insurgency. That's what it is.
Spiritual insurgent.
So it's time now to enjoy creation. The dark is slowly fading out from this planet. Our divine abilities to create are being restored because we've learned our lessons and we are allowed to enjoy it. For me, this is a retirement life. I will not set foot in a human body again after this. So for me, it's a very different experience.
That's a culmination, man. You're at your peak. That's very cool, especially because you're aware of it, because that's what we're all going to, the place where we consciously decide, am I going to come back? Am I going to be this? Am I complete with this experience and ready to move into a different realm of experience?
Yes.
That's beautiful.
There is a grieving process in that, but the grieving process itself, there's a beauty in it. It is an appreciation of the beauty of the totality of the human experience.
Absolutely. You're finishing a cycle as a human, and humans have feelings. Of course you're going to grieve. It's part of the nature. Isn't that
fascinating?
But but it's just beautiful that you're at that graduation level. You're making ascension, whether it's turning into a ball of light in front of everybody's eyes like Ezekiel did, or whether it's transitioning through what we would call a physical death. You're ready to make that and move into the realm of whatever's next for Julian. And, even though we're not going to see each other on the physical plane here, there's a time when you and I are going to go play again in the other realms.
Well, the whole reason to take bodies for some of us was because after the Atlantean downfall, it's just that the psychic abilities of humanity went into a deep, dark sleep. And so they needed embodiment. They needed embodied teachers. They needed the idea of an interface because they couldn't perceive their own divinity directly. So they needed to have something externalized to relate to have a conversation with, because they couldn't have a conversation with themselves. So many beings made a sacrifice to go down in density in order to be that embodiment. There are very particular reasons, for example, why the Buddha did it. He actually did not come originally from this planet, but when he saw what happened after Atlantis, he took on the challenge and says, I'm going to find the analysis, I'm going to make the analysis of suffering. And then I'm going to find the cure for this new Atlantean mind that is imprisoning everybody in the ego. And that was Buddhism. That was his answer to it.
So that's beautiful.
So beings have been coming down. And the older you get, even though there is no time in that way, the only time that we have is the time we spend in time. But ultimately, we don't have time. But there is an age to the soul, and it's more a feeling. And there's a moment where our energy becomes too intense that it becomes a burden to reach down. And I'm tired of reaching down.
You're ready to fly. You're ready to fly. Well, thank you. And I had the pleasure, actually, one of the great beings I met, physical, he knew his past lives, but he decided to incarnate simply to be here at this point in time for awakening on the planet, to help many, many people awaken, which I was one of the beneficiaries of. But he came a whole bunch of other times first to get the energies right, leading up to this time coming, and it's like, to even think of like I call him a great being, think of it in those terms But then what we discussed earlier, that, you know, we're all that same stuff. We're all that same greatness. We just haven't been on that plan, you know, and just haven't put our consciousness to it yet because we've been playing the density game.
Yes. And that is perfectly fine. This is what
Yeah.
children do.
Right, right. Well, I want to thank you. I'm going to get one more plug, becomingawesome.one. Check my book out, which will be available soon. You can sign up for classes. Those are available right now. And then my wife and I offer on a donation basis, so don't worry about money, individual coaching and clearing sessions to help you. So especially if you're serious about this, if you resonated with what's been, Julie and I have been speaking about this whole time, where you're ready to do some of that shadow work, do some of that alchemy, you know, we got techniques to help. So becomingawesome.one.
That's wonderful. So Peter, if you would like to make one last statement, it can come from Peter, it can come from more of you. It's how you choose. One last statement where you feel what can serve people at this moment, aside, of course, from you offering service in the way that you do. But what is the current understanding or the fringe experience that you're having where you're saying, oh, this might assist you?
Let me tell you, and this won't assist you, but it will inspire you, hopefully. In that, here I is telling you all the stuff I do, and my wife was telling me she's excited because she's just come on board and got 3 sessions booked this week already. And I was telling her, you know, every time I do a session with somebody who's serious, even though we're going through terrible crap, all their darkness and stuff, I fall in love. Because for the moments we're together, I'm seeing their authentic self. And I'm connected to my source and their source while I'm viewing their authentic self. And there can be nothing else but love. Mm. And so literally, what I do isn't work. I fall in love multiple times a day. And I'm telling you this because I want all of you out there to know that you're going to go to Julian's school and become the people who fall in love by helping others. Or you're going to attend some of the programs I'm offering. And this is the end point. You think you're doing work, and you are, and it's going to be helpful. But really, you're just going to fall in love over and over.
Mm. There's a deep, profound truth in that. Because initiation and service are one and the same. Those who serve experience initiation, they experience a greater love every single time they serve. And by loving, we discover self-love. But we often need to love first. We need to make a choice to radiate instead of absorb.
Yep.
All right, Peter. This is a very, very wonderful conversation. And I love that it is a little bit of an experimental conversation. Because we didn't follow any type of traditional structure. Yeah, we were very, very spontaneous, which I really enjoy.
And this is the first time we've met, right, or spoken to each other. And so for every people listening, you know, as you allow, things will come to you. And at least on my end, it's like, this is sweet. Thank you. More, please. Thank you. All right.
Then I would say we wrap it up for today. Thank you very, very much for co-creating, you and the rest of you.
Many blessings to all of you attending and listening and viewing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for doing what you do.